Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and we would kindly ask you to reserve your applause until the end of today's concert lecture. The operas of Schubert. Well, any Schubert lover will tell you that when the subject turns to opera, it's a little bit embarrassing, because such a great Lieder composer, such a great composer, and 10 operas, and none of them performed on an everyday basis. I would like to say that there may be a few people among you, if you are opera fanatics, who've seen a performance of Alfonso und Estrella, or maybe even Fierabras. But the operas of Schubert have disappeared from the general repertoire. Despite their musical beauties, they've been let down by their incompetent librettists, and they often seem clunky and slow-moving on stage. He was not suited to the opera medium. The opera medium is the broad brush of story and narrative. The Lied, in which he is the unexcelled master, is full of small and exquisite detail. Not a fresco on a ceiling, but a brilliantly engineered miniature. The operatic form slowed down Schubert's mercurial musical responses and made them sound stilted. An orchestra is a blunt instrument for accompanying anything that is extremely mercurial and changeable. Between a pianist and a singer, there is a few feet, and miracles of complicity can be engineered by these two people working together and immediately heard within the confines of a smaller hall. Sitting in a vast operatic expanse, the bigger picture, the broader picture is everything. And no matter how brilliant a conductor may be, he can never engineer those minute changes of balance and emphasis, instantaneous response that are the responsibilities of the song accompanist. Well, Schubert had little choice. Unlike Mozart, who learned all about opera by having his early operas hit the stage almost as soon as he'd composed them. Unlike Mozart, Schubert came from a very much more humble background. He had to cut his cloth according to domestic circumstances. And his joy was composing opera in the home. He attuned himself to the ballads of a composer from Stuttgart called Johann Rudolf Zumsteeg. And Zumsteeg wrote extraordinary narrative ballads with stories that enchanted and interested Schubert's school friends. He entertained his young colleagues in the schoolroom, and that is where he found his métier, opera in the home. Now, there are many things that the song form cannot do in terms of excitement in comparison with opera, but Schubert, with his imagination and his versatility, was able to transcend very often the capabilities of the operatic stage. In Monona, from February 1815, the beloved bride of Edgar has presentiments of doom. What's happened to him? She's extremely worried. Only Edgar's dog, and believe you me, there are not many dogs in Lieder. Beethoven wrote a song about a poodle, but there is a dog. He is aware of the tragedy that has befallen his master, and he has to tell Monona all about it by whining and scratching at the door. She has to hear the fatal news that she does not want to hear. In an opera house where a dog could never perform the role as admirably as Schubert at the piano. It would have been overkill for an entire orchestra to represent a single mastiff. It's far easier for that task to be undertaken by an accompanist who, as many of us know, is more accustomed to the role of faithful hound. A few weeks later, in 1815, Schubert composed the mythological ballad Amphiaraos, where there's a mighty battle scene. Now, many of you are aware that there are a few battle scenes in opera. One thinks of that fight scene in Meistersinger, where everybody really has an incredible ding-dong. It's amazing, but it takes, as any repetiteur knows, an awful and horrendous amount of work to stage it and to learn the music. The thing about opera in the home is that it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut. And here we have, in Amphiaraos, a battle where Schubert allows us to hear what's happening in an interlude. The great waves of battle without having to stage them in realistic terms. Some of you must be thinking silent film music. And indeed, it is just that. Except there was no such thing as cinema in Schubert's day, not even photography. We're accustomed to the cinema and TV with moving images of every kind, shifting a scene in a split second. Schubert visualizes such moving images without ever having seen pictures spliced together and watchable on screen. Can you imagine a time when the only drama you'd ever seen was laboriously calculated theater, taking place with scene changes and interludes and the whole operatic business? And suddenly, it's possible to go past all that, almost a journey into the future. He knew nothing about film, of course. It hadn't been invented. But he learnt from the concisions and elisions of poetry. He used the tricks of cinematic narrative a century before they became part of everyday life. And his songs often have the speed, concision, and vividness of brilliantly directed, fast-moving cinema. An example of this is the opening of the great Schiller ballad Die Burgschaft, August 1815. In only 25 bars, we hear an attempted assassination. The man is apprehended by the guard. He faces the tyrant whom he's been attempting to slay. He's questioned, what do you want to do? Why did you do it? He answers, to free the city from a tyrant. And, as is the case in tyrannies, the sentence of death is proposed immediately. And what's more, it's a crucifixion. All of this in 25 bars.
Dolch im Gewande. Ihn schlugen die Häscher im Bande. Was wolltest du mit dem Dolche? Sprich, entgegnet ihm finster der Wüterich. Die Stadt von Tyrannen befreien, das sollst du am Kreuze bereuen.
All of this in 25 bars, and the characterization of nobility and determination and bravery with the would-be assassin who believes that he's doing a good thing. Then he's clapped in irons and questioned and condemned to die. You'll regret it on the cross. Well, the most extraordinary thing about this is it's like a television series where we're reminded of the highlights of the last episode, just enough to get the picture in a telescoped way before moving on. In Die Burgschaft, the man is condemned to death, leaving his dearest friend as a hostage and is permitted to go to his sister's wedding. This is stretching credulity, but an honorable man can be a would-be assassin and a good brother at the same time. Everything conspires against his return, and of course the position is if he doesn't get home in time, his friend who is the hostage will be crucified in his stead. Here is an illustration of one of the earlier hurdles. Could an opera house of the time cope with this singing in the rain, a depiction of ceaseless downflow, swollen rivers, and a bridge being swept away? This is quickly followed by the hero swimming through the river, encountering a murderous band of robbers, and soon afterwards suffering from so much heat that he almost dies of thirst. Schubert responds to all these challenges manfully. This is not just music for films, this is the directing of the film itself. Schubert's brain is faster and more flexible and imaginative than any operatic staging could ever be. And after all his musical editing and splicing, anything superfluous is left on the cutting room floor. Now for a ballad with words by Hölty. Normally, Hölty is a poet of beautiful pastoral rhyme, gentle settings that we love, above all by Brahms and Schubert. But this is a Gothic horror. This is a nun, a Sicilian nun who has unfortunately allowed herself to be seduced by someone who then lets her down by having affairs with women on every side. Because she is Sicilian, rather than because she's a nun, she hires a group of murderers to kill her faithless lover. But that's not enough. He's killed, all right. He's buried. But she insists on digging up his body, ripping up his heart with her bare hands, and stamping on the organ that squelches beneath her feet. An act of impossible surgery. But we get the point. This would be an impossible scenario in an opera house, or even a film. We are now in the realms of violent manga anime cartoons.
Die Buren manches Blütes Schwert in davon zu wissen, dass du für soll das Gotteshaus und tratest mit den Fissern.
Well, clearly everybody was having a lot of fun. But Schubert takes very seriously narrative and imaginative storytelling that borders on the operatic. We're going to hear a complete masterpiece from September 1815, a ballad, Cronan, the text by the ancient Celtic poet Ossian, in reality a literary fabrication by a Scot named James Macpherson. The arioso soliloquies and conversations between the noble hero, Cronan, and the ghostly heroine seem to me to prophesy Wagner. Cronan, by the way, is the name of the poet, like Homer. The characters are actually Schilrik and Winweller, and they appear in one other great Schubert piece from Ossian. But what I think is remarkable is how, when they speak together and how the ariosas work, I am reminded of Wagner. I'm reminded of those noble conversations at length that take place in the ring between Brunhilde and Wotan, for example. And this idea of recitative that is half melodic, not the dry recitative of Mozart operas, but recitative which is like speech, but which nevertheless has great melodic beauty. And one thinks of how it's perfectly possible that this work, first published in 1830, came into the hands of a 17-year-old music student from Leipzig, where he could have bought the music or read it, called Richard Wagner. As for the unearthly appearance and disappearance of the spirit of Winweller in this remarkable ballad, it would take the cinematic mastery of the Lord of the Rings to do justice to the magical atmosphere, the mist, the deserted former battlefield, the Celtic twilight that Schubert has conjured in his head.
Steigen vom Hügel herab. Kein Jäger wird in der Ferne gesehen. Es ist Mittag, aber alles ist still. Dich wollt ich trösten, o meine Geliebte. Dich wollt ich führen zum Hause meines Vaters. Aber ist sie es, die dort wie ein Strahl des Lichts auf der Heide erscheint? Kommst du, Mädchen, über Felsen, über Berge zu mir, schimmend wie im Herbst der Mond, wie die Sonne in der Glut des Sommers. Sie spricht, aber wie schwach ist ihre Stimme. Wie das Lüftchen im Schiffe der See. Schönste, ich kehre zurück, aber allein von meinem Geschlecht. Jenes sollst du nicht mehr erblicken. Ich hab ihre Gräber auf der Fläche errichtet. Aber warum bist du am Hügel der Wüste? Warum allein auf der Heide?
We now move 10 years later in Schubert's career, 1825, exactly 200 years ago. Vienna had fallen mightily under the spell of the operas of Rossini, and La Donna del Lago in particular, the opera fashioned after Walter Scott's The Lady of the Lake. No less an opera star than the soprano Henrietta Sontag, whom Schubert greatly admired, starred in the leading role of Elena. How he would have loved Sontag to sing Estrella in his own opera, Alfonso and Estrella. You cannot deny Rossini his genius, said Schubert, although it would have been superhuman of him not to resent the way that all German opera had been replaced with Italian, thus extinguishing his own operatic hopes. In 1825, Schubert fought back in his own way. Sieben Gesänge aus Scott's Fräulein vom See is 7 highlights from Walter Scott's epic poem, and he relies on his cultured Viennese audience to know the plot already. The highlight formula is one where Schubert could retain his integrity as a leader composer and hopefully tap into an opera public who loved a narrative storyline. The whole of Schubert's life, in a way, is a search for cycle, a way to make single songs cohere together to make a greater sum of their parts. We're in Scotland in the early 1530s. The young King James V is facing a rebellion from Sir Roderick Dhu, the fiery and menacing head of the Highland clan Alpine. Roderick Dhu has given his protection to James Douglas, also exiled from royal favour, presently in hiding with his beautiful daughter Ellen on an island in the middle of Loch Katrine in the Trossachs, some 40 miles north of Glasgow. King James decides to lead a reconnaissance expedition into Roderick Dhu's territory in the guise of a stag hunt. The stag outruns the horses, the king's horse dies, he's hopelessly lost and finds himself on the banks of Loch Katrine. He sees a beautiful woman sailing on a skiff across the lake. She is Ellen, beautiful daughter of the exiled James Douglas. In this story, no one recognizes the true identity of anyone else. It might just as well be Twelfth Night. The skiff comes ashore and the king introduces himself to Ellen as James Fitzjames, Knight of Snowdon. Ellen honors the ancient Highland tradition of hospitality to strangers and takes him across the lake to an island lodge made of tree trunks, the secret hideout for her father, the exiled James Douglas. Ellen, accompanied by the harp of the attendant minstrel, Alan Bain, sings 2 songs to honor their mystery guest, while having no idea that this knight is her king and her father's persecutor, and the king having no idea that the beautiful woman he sees is the daughter of someone he perceives to be an enemy.
Nicht der Ton
paused, then blushing led the lay to grace the stranger of the day. Her mellow notes a while prolonged the cadence of the flowing song, till to her lips in measured frame the minstrel verse spontaneous came. The hall was cleared, the stranger's bed was there of mountain heather spread, where oft 100 guests had lain and dreamed their forest sports again. And so the king sleeps in the strange arboreal bower. Despite his suspicions and disturbing dreams, he's fallen in love with Ellen. He departs the island early in the morning. Later that same morning, the island is visited by Sir Roderick Dhu, the Highland chief. He's accompanied by a team of oarsmen who row him across the lake, which, by the way, is 8 miles long and 1 mile wide. As they row, they raucously sing of their loyalty to the chief of their clan. We hear the song in the original English of Scott, which Schubert had printed in the song's first edition as an alternative option. Come to the island to propose marriage to Ellen, but she refuses him. She's in love with another outlawed Highland chief, the young Malcolm Graham, whom the pugnacious Sir Roderick banishes forthwith from his territory. But now it's time for Roderick's war with the king and the summoning of all men loyal to the clan Alpine. The means of mustering this army is the presentation of a fiery cross, a sign that every able-bodied man must turn up at the designated place, Lanrick Mead, ready to give his life in battle. This terrifying summons arrives too late for Duncan, an important chief in the clan who has just died. Within the hall where torches' rays supply the excluded beams of day lies Duncan in his lowly bier, and o'er him streams his widow's tear. His stripling son stands mournful by, his youngest weeps, but knows not why. The village maids and matrons round, the dismal coronach resound.
Is gone on the mountain
It is now the responsibility of the deceased Duncan's son, Angus, to take the fiery cross to the next clan outpost. His arrival interrupts a wedding between Norman, a young member of the clan, and his bride, Mary. Confronted with this fiery summons and death to those who disobey, Norman has no option but to leave his bride and gallop off to combat. Yet slow he laid his plaid aside, and lingering eyes his lovely bride. Then trusting not a second look, in haste he spread him up the brook. Mingled with love's impatience came the manly thirst for martial fame, and zeal for clan and chieftain burning, and hope from well-fought field returning, with war's red honours on his crest, to clasp his Mary to his breast. Stung by such thoughts, o'er bank and brae, like fire from flint he glanced away, while high resolve and feeling song burst into voluptuous song.
Die Nacht wird bald herein, dann leg ich mich zur Ruh. Die Heide ist mein Lager, das Frankreich dächt mich zu. Mich lullt der Wache, tritt wohl in den Schlaf hinein. Ach, muss so weit von dir, Maria, holde sein. Ach, muss so weit von dir, Maria, sein. Und wird es morgen Abend und kommt die trübe Zeit, dann ist vielleicht mein Lager dir blutig rote Kleid. Ein Abendlied verstummet, dann steigt und trüb und bang. Maria, mich wecken kann nicht ein Totensang. Maria, mich wecken kann nicht ein Totensang. So musst ich von dir scheiden, du holde, süße Braut. Wie magst du nach mir rufen, wie magst du weinen laut? Ach, denken darf ich nicht an deinen herben Schmerz. Ach, denken darf ich nicht an dein getreues Herz. Ach, denken darf ich nicht an deinem Schmerz, an dein getreues Herz. Nein, zärtlich treues Sehnen darf hegen Norman nicht, wenn in den Waldplan Alpin wie Sturm und Hagel bricht, wie ein gespannter Bogen mein mutig Herz dann sei. Sein Fuß, Maria, wieder bald so rasch und frei. Sein Fuß, Maria, wieder bald so rasch und frei. Wohl wird die Stunde kommen, wo nicht die Sonne scheint. Du weinst zu deinem Norman, dein holdes Auge weint. Doch fall ich in der Schlacht, hüllst du die Schauer mich. O glaub, mein letzter Seufzer, Maria, ist für dich. O glaub, mein letzter Seufzer, Maria, ist für dich. Doch kehr ich siegreich wieder aus kühner Männer Schlacht, dann grüßen wir so freudig das Land der stillen Nacht. Das Lager ist bereitet, uns winkt die süße Ruh. Der Hänfling singt laut Lieder, Maria, holt uns zu. Dann grüßen wir so freudig das Land der stillen Nacht. Es winkt die süße Ruh, Maria, holt uns zu. Dann grüßen wir so freudig das Land der stillen Nacht. Es winkt die süße Ruh, Maria, holt uns zu. Es winkt die süße Ruh, Maria, holt uns zu.
Determined not to get mixed up in Roderick Dhu's rebellion against the king, Ellen's father, remember, he's the one who's been hiding with her on the island in the middle of Loch Atron. Ellen's father, James Douglas, disappears from the island, determined to give himself up to the king and attempt to mend their differences. Ellen, desperately worried about her father, sings a hymn to the Virgin, praying for his safety from harm. But hark, what mingles in the strain? It is the harp of Alan Bain. What melting voice attends the strings? 'Tis Ellen, or an angel sings. plot gathers pace for 3 remaining cantos, 3 more days of the 6-day story. Malcolm Graham, with whom Ellen is in love, is captured by the king's forces and taken to prison in Stirling. The king, still claiming to be James Fitzjames, proposes marriage to Ellen, and she refuses. Her heart belongs to Malcolm. Roderick Dhu and the king meet in combat man to man, and Roderick is vanquished by the king's superior swordsmanship. The rebel chieftain is taken mortally wounded to Stirling Castle, where the denouement now takes place. Already imprisoned in Stirling is Ellen's true love, Malcolm Graham. The plot brings Ellen and her father, now pardoned, to the same place, Stirling Castle. Ellen waits in a room in the castle, hoping to have audience of the king, whom she believes she has never met. And then she hears the voice of Malcolm singing, coming from above her window. What distant music has the power to win her in this woeful hour? 'Twas from a turret that o'erhung her latticed bower. The strain was sung. James Fitzjames the mysterious knight, arrives to escort Ellen to her audience with the king. She intends to ask his mercy for Roderick Dhu and for Malcolm Graham. On arriving in the silence room, and remember she's come in the audience room, she's come in with the king, she fails to see where the king is. She slowly realizes that it is the very man who has escorted her into the room. She gazed on many a princely port, might well have ruled a royal court. On many a splendid garb she gazed, then turned bewildered and amazed, for all stood bare, and in the room Fitzjames alone wore cap and plume. To him each lady's look was lent, on him each courtier's eye was bent. Midst furs and silks and jewels' sheen, he stood in simple Lincoln's green, the centre of the glittering ring, and Snowdon's knight is Scotland's king. This king will one day be the father of Mary, Queen of Scots, but that's another story. In this story, the king is merciful and chooses to heal rather than divide his kingdom. He forgives James Douglas, and despite loving Ellen himself, magnanimously blesses the union between her and Malcolm Graham. And Walter Scott writes some lines that should be a lesson to the all-powerful would-be kings of today. The monarch drank that happy hour, the sweetest, holiest draught of power, when it can say with godlike voice, arise, sweet virtue, and rejoice. Thus watch I o'er insulted laws, thus learn to right the injured cause. As we inevitably have turned our thoughts to the United States, one may remark on the American legacy of the Lady of the Lake. The former slave, Frederick Johnson, adopted the name of Douglas and thus became Frederick Douglass, a famous figure of black emancipation. An early American setting of the boating chorus, Hail to the Chief, became the signature tune and remains so of the United States President. Thus it is that a melody composed by James Sanderson in 1812 accompanies every appearance of President Trump whenever there is a band or orchestra nearby. The insidious and long-lasting effects of art. Not so nice is the fiery cross summoning the clans to war, which became a symbol, thanks to Scott, of the Ku Klux Klan. Schubert was alive to every means to turn his great and extraordinary gift for writing songs into something that would have a bigger and more lasting significance, a contribution to the larger cultural life of the nation, not just tiny miniatures by poets, but stories beloved of the public. And one such story was the play Lacrimas by Wilhelm Schütz. And that is the story of Florio and Delfina. The play opens in the harbor of Malaga in Spain, where a ship is docked. On the ship is a slave girl who has bewitched Florio with her singing. He determines to free her from captivity at all costs. She turns out to be no slave girl, but a Moorish princess. Of course, just as Florio turns out to be the son of a sultan. Hurrah! They are fit to marry each other in terms of rank. But this is to rush ahead of the story. There's been a change of location from Malaga to the oriental kingdom of El Madina, where the only way the besotted Florio can get anywhere near Delfina is to work as a woodcutter in her garden. He sings a serenade looking at her longingly from a distance, and referring to his love for her as something like a poison seeping through his veins, like a surfeit of unconsummated love. He is in a swoon, a delirium of passion. In the following year, Franz Schubert would write Winterreise, which is performed today with as much regularity as any opera by Rossini, Puccini, or Verdi. If this composer has failed to give us an opera that holds the stage, it's certain that he experimented with every other conceivable means of holding an audience's attention when it came to words and music. Rather than serving up everything on the operatic stage, he excelled in using his imagination to supply the curtains, the lighting, the costumes, the makeup, the stage direction, while relying on all of us listeners to meet him halfway and supply just as much imagination and concentrated attention as he provides when they listen to his music. This is a two-way imaginative process. To end today's lecture, we return to the play Lacrimas and Schubert's attempts to encapsulate a theatrical work in song terms, in an aria perhaps, but in a song aria rather than an opera aria. We've just heard from Florio about his swooning love for Delphina, and she's in love with the handsome man who has serenaded her. no doubt of it. First, she has sent her beautiful maidservant to attempt to seduce him, and when he resists, pleading that he must be faithful to Delfina, well, Delfina is now certain that Florio is the man for her. She sings a song in halting poetic meter of various conflicting emotions. A long, confident line followed by a shorter, reticent one, almost apologetic. Ach, was soll ich beginnen? Vor Liebe. Ach, wie sich innig durchdringet mein Inneres. Sometimes the voice bursts out and surges to heights of operatic passion and confidence, but the whole work is built on a motif of trembling diffidence and uncertainty. The tremor, the uncertainty, the thrill. We encounter a mixture of inexperienced modesty and flushed curiosity. Delfina is on the threshold of sexual discovery, and her curiosity is both passionate and terrified. She's been closely chaperoned all her life and longs for release, afraid of what this physical love might entail, but also aroused. She is eager and hesitant at the same time, complex and conflicting emotions, which Schubert's music brilliantly depicts. These two aspects are often ignored in performances of this music when a diva gets her teeth into it, rejoicing in the chance to sing a high C in a Lieder recital. This is to miss the point. Schubert composes in something of an operatic style, but he cannot help remaining what he was born to be, a master of subtle, multi-leveled emotion, which was unsuited to the conventional operatic expression of his own time. It would take a Benjamin Britten more than 100 years later to marry opera and song together with this kind of subtlety in word setting.
Oh,